Hi everyone, welcome back to Woman Carrying Man. I'm Jake, this is Nadia, this is Buddy, this is Sedona, and today we are talking about The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, the complete show. We just finished the last episode. We are going to first talk about non-spoilers and then go into spoilers, so if you haven't finished the show, you're safe to watch for now. We did a review for the first two episodes, which, if anyone remembers, I was very positive on. We were both quite positive on. I thought there was a lot of potential. I thought the budget was really evident, it looked very good, and I'd maintain that throughout the whole show it looked excellent, and I thought the music was fantastic, but I want to talk more in depth about everything here, so can you please, what did you think?
I was a little disappointed as it kept going, but then, so I didn't, like, the first two episodes, like I stated in the first review, I thought it was done really well. As I started going, there were some things that I felt like was too dragged on, some storylines. Started to not like Galadriel's character a little bit in a lot of episodes. I felt like it was kind of contradictory to her main personality. From the show, I felt like she lacked a lot of tact, and I also felt like she came off really arrogant. I know she obviously didn't intentionally sabotage herself in a lot of situations, but it felt like she did because of the way that she was going about it. It just wasn't smart. As far as the last episode, I felt like I liked it a lot. So overall, I would rate the show in its entirety. I'm struggling a little bit because I love Lord of the Rings so much that I really want to give it a 10, but I'd probably give it a 7.
Yeah, I liked it probably far less than you did, but it all came down to follow through, what they were willing to do with these characters. It just felt like each story thread had its moments that it just fell on its face. I'm willing to sit through slower stuff, and I don't think the issue is that the show was slow. I think the issue is that it was poorly paced. Certain threads move too slow and then fast all of a sudden. The problem is when we're talking about like pace, I think what we're really talking about is the writers behind the scenes going, well, we need this to happen because we need this to happen at this point. And it's not going to happen at this point because we don't need that to happen yet. Regardless of how great the show looked and the music and how much effort and care they were putting into it, the writing just wasn't there. It wasn't at the level it needed to be for these characters. I think my favorite characters were Durin and Elrond. I loved the friendship between Elrond and Durin. That was my favorite part because the show got us invested in the stakes of their relationship and their friendship. The problem is the other characters in the show, it was hard to care very much about them. Galadriel, I actually liked her a lot from the beginning. I liked seeing that passion and drive that she had. Like, she would do anything to get Sauron. It's to the point where, like you said, her choices that she makes, she has no tact, and it started to feel like she's being stupid for the sake of the show to be plotted this way. And part of the issue is, like, I got the sense that this show was written primarily from a plot perspective of we need to hit these beats instead of character focused. And the Lord of the Rings has plot and has very good plot. It's all about the characters. And when you look at those movies, they did a great job of making us feel for these characters. There are so many choices that didn't make sense for me. And another issue, I think, is that they introduced far too many characters for this first season. I think that, like, by the third episode, they were still introducing new characters. And I was going, and the problem was they weren't getting me invested enough in each of these threads. Like the Harfoots, I wasn't too invested in them after a certain point when I kind of got the sense like, okay, they're just going to hold back their reveal for who the stranger is until the end, just because.
They were really absent in a whole episode, actually.
There were, and I wouldn't miss them. That's the thing. Like, when people would leave and they wouldn't be there for an episode, then they'd come back and be like, oh yeah, they're here. It's like I forgot that they were part of the show, And then when they did try to bring these threads together at the end, it felt really clumsy. It felt like it wasn't a natural progression of where the story was heading. Like, it was all inevitable. Like, it had to come to this. It felt like, well, it's the end of the season. Let's put these reveals in, Like, we got to reveal some stuff because we've been teasing this, and now we got to give the audience a little treat.
Well, I think it would have been better, to your point, if they did a little, because a good amount of things were revealed in the last episode, and I actually do think that it came together beautifully in the last episode.
I was very unsatisfied with it.
Well, yeah, we can get into that. But for me, I really felt like the revelation happened in a natural way. At least I interpreted it that way. It only happened for me in the last episode. And I think that, to your point, we had so many characters. They could have paced it out. I feel like they could have left some of the episode with more of a hook.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what was missing. Some of it, there wasn't a hook at the end that was like, ooh, I can't wait to watch it. Oh my God, what's going to happen? I think that when I think about a good hook, not every episode of the last season of Stranger Things has that, but a lot of them do. And it's like, you want to binge it, you know, you just can't wait.
The episodes were really long. You know, they were all like 70, 75 minutes, which is pretty long for an episode of TV. And it also felt like it didn't justify the length. Unmotivated, it felt like character decisions that were unmotivated. Like, for example, the elf and the human love story, you know, that whole story. And she has her son.
What happened to that though?
Well, you know, it's like all about going towards this battle and fighting. But they didn't give me any reason to care about their relationship. They set up like, okay, they're in love with each other and it's like a forbidden love. But we don't see them make any real decisions together. They're just kind of off on their own for the most part. When you tell us like, hey, care about these characters, it doesn't work. You have to see them doing things that makes us care for them, you know, like, and there were a lot of things like for the Harfoot story, a lot of the characters, and there are things that we can talk about in spoilers that happen where I just lost all feeling for their community. I cared about the one who's with the stranger, you know, and the choices they made were like just not compelling, or I just lost interest in it.
I actually think that the show knows that in some ways because of, and we'll get into it in spoiler, but the way that it ended.
It was too little too late.
No, because there's more seasons to come. I don't think it's too little too late. You're talking about it being shorter. I don't think it should have been shorter because there's a lot of characters. And I think it would have been really confusing unless you're in the assumption that everyone who watches it read the book or watched the movies. The show takes a lot of liberty with storylines. So even if you're a big fan of the books or movies or both, you're not going to really know everything that happens. I honestly think it's a pacing for a lot of it. When you talk about the elf and the human, they treated their love story as if they had already been married.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you and me, like, we're boring now. You know, it's not like as much like, oh my God, does he like me? I like him back kind of thing. You know, you're not as invested in a story when you're not part of the journey, unless it's an absolutely amazing, brilliant writing. But I feel like for this specific plot line of the many stories that happens in the show, it's just like, okay, they're married, they're together, they know they're together. Cool.
Another thing why this whole season didn't work is because it's setting up very familiar kind of like first season of TV situation where we just set up these mysteries and we just leave them unanswered to keep people watching. And that wasn't enough for me to be interested. You know, like the main mysteries of, okay, who is Hallbrand? Who are these people who are super pale following the stranger? Who is the stranger? Okay, we can kind of guess or figure out like one of them is this, one of them is that.
I was wrong, by the way.
But once you get to the reveal, then it's just like, okay, like we know. And another big issue. So the first big issue, I think, is that mystery box situation of we have these things that are unanswered that we're just going to leave hanging until the end just to keep people watching. And it wasn't enough motivation. Another big issue is that this is all a prequel. Prequels are so hard to do because you know ultimately what's going to happen. You're expecting things to happen. And when you're trying to set up this big mystery box of, will this stuff happen? What is this? What is this? You know ultimately what's going to happen in the end. So you have to hook us in a different way. And they were trying to hook us in a way as if this were the first media about Lord of the Rings we'd ever seen. Here's an example, and I know this is kind of a cheap shot because everyone's comparing House of the Dragon to this show, even though they're so different. I think it's not fair to compare them. House of the Dragon is a much better show in my opinion, and it's doing things different from this show. But what it does well, it's a prequel to Game of Thrones, and we basically know what's going to go down eventually. It's so character focused and it cares about where it's taking us and the characters, and it's so immersed in these characters that we are hooked. Like, I'm so hooked to watch the next episode of House of the Dragon. Whereas Rings of Power, I would just be like, oh yeah, did that Did that come out last night? Should we? Yeah, I guess we'll watch it.
I
on
feel
Monday,
like that is a little cheap shot because first of all, like for me, House of the Dragon, it gives me so much anxiety. What I like about Lord of the Rings is it's very family oriented in a lot of ways.
You can be family oriented, but still have high stakes. The stakes.
Well, that's what I meant when I compared it to Stranger Things as well. Is that like it's a family oriented?
Stranger Things. I think Stranger Things season 4. It had much
last season, but we want to be clear that
yes.
we're talking about the last season.
But there were a lot of characters in that season too, a lot of different threads, but it felt engaging. Each of those threads felt engaging.
There were some threads that didn't feel engaging.
Not as much.
If you want to know more about that, by the way, we do a review, and I guess we'll link that in the description as well.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I feel like a lot of the issues I have with this season of Rings of Power were similar issues I had with The Wheel of Time, season 1.
Yes.
The same teasing of, okay, what's the mystery? Who's the dragon reborn? Who is Sauron?
Oh my God. Yes. It literally reminds me of that. With that being said, because I'm such a big Lord of the Rings fan, I can honestly watch the movies 10 times. I do see myself feeling nostalgic for the show and going back. But what I see is only watching certain episodes, watching it through an app and then forwarding certain things, or, it's just there. It does have really good moments in there. And I don't want it to paint it as really negative because I think overall there's a lot that doesn't work, but there are moments that do work together. I just wish that there were more of those things.
Yeah, I'd like to look a little closer also at because I think the parallels between Wheel of Time are very interesting. Like I feel like the Wheel of Time season 1 also lagged a lot in the middle episodes where it felt like we were going on a sidetrack that was like, can we get back to the main story?
Yes.
I felt like this show did that too. Also, the ending, and we can talk about this in spoilers, incredibly similar to the Wheel of Time. I'm really disappointed about the show. There was a point where I was watching like episode 4 or something, and I was like I was watching a big battle, and I'm like, I don't really care what happens to these characters.
But with that being said, let's get to the spoiler section. But before we do, what would you rate it?
4 or 5 out of 10.
Whoa, okay. Well, let's get to the spoiler section, and why don't you expand on that?
The Sauron reveal was not good. The final episode, they introduce Wizard as Sauron, and we just went, what?
There's no way.
Yeah, and we were like, no. It's like we could tell, and it was a fake out because then soon after we see Halbrand, and there's all these shots of Galadriel with Halbrand going looking at him strangely, and Halbrand acting kind of weird and menacing. And what we know about Sauron is that
it's deceitful.
He's deceitful. He convinced the elves to do the Rings of Power, and he can convince people to do things by making them think it was their idea, he's very skilled at that. I predicted Halbrand was Sauron early on. We were
first episode, yeah.
We were like, oh, this, the way he would bring ideas to people and make it think it was their idea. This is probably Sauron.
I want to point to what you said earlier about how prequels are so hard because you have an expectation.
Yeah.
I knew that too because this is a character that we're not aware of. And also this goes to my point of being Galadriel, being so not having tact at all, that it's you could tell that he was getting her using her character flaw.
Yeah, and Galadriel just seemed really stupid.
Yes, and it was what the heck? You're making her into this warrior, this person who's very motivated, but then she doesn't seem like she has any experience in the world of politics.
Not only did she seem stupid, she seemed arrogant and rude.
Yeah, and it's oh, I see why people hate elves. If they're
honestly,
you.
And that's another problem, is that when we're watching the Numenor stuff, and I'm going I kind of get why the humans are sick of the elves.
Because you're acting like you own them.
Yeah, and it's oh, the good people are the ones who are devoted to elves and think they're amazing. And I'm kind of
what the heck is up about that?
Yeah, what's about that? There are superiors? I don't know.
With that being said, I do feel the last episode did her a lot more justice in the sense that she was able to figure out who Sauron really was by, she remembered something that Celebrimbor said about flesh and power and this ruling over flesh, the rings that they were making that they first thought was going to be a crown. You know who else said that? The elf father of the orcs, or whom they call the father, who's also an elf. He said something similar. So she was able to piece the clue. She wanted to go back in history and check, like, is this like guy who he really is? And she finds out that he's actually deceitful. Clues should have been going on in her head really early on.
Yeah, it should have been early on. And here's a question. Do you think the season would have been more interesting if we just knew who Sauron was from the start? We knew Halbrand was Sauron. Would it be more engaging? You know, I asked that question.
I don't think so. I don't think it's necessarily like, yes, it could. I think it's a difficult question to answer because I think there's a lot of other revelation that happened that they could have actually told us earlier. And then that way there's a final reveal of Sauron. That I think that would have been better. Like, for example, the stranger. You know, if we
the thing is, they were trying to make it really like a mystery when it felt like they were trying to be more clever than it actually was, I think.
Well, it's like, we know, like, I think that they were treating the audience like they were stupid. Because it's like, we know this is not actually going to be Sauron. I thought he was Saruman, but then I think he's actually Gandalf.
I feel like they're just going to go with Gandalf. And another thing, like, because it's a prequel, there are certain moments that they try to play to be dramatic that just feel like, can we just stop wasting time on this? Isildur, we know that he's not dead because he's a major character later on. So when his dad is mourning him and when he's talking to the queen and all that, blah, 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 it's just like, we get it. He's not dead. Like, can we just avoid this, like, fake out death when we know, like, it just annoys me that we're spending so much time on it.
It's like, it would have maybe it would have worked. I don't know if we didn't understand, if this wasn't a prequel, if this was the first time we were watching it.
Can we talk a little bit about Galadriel deciding not to tell everyone that Halbrand is Sauron?
God, I can't, because that pissed me off. So you talk about it.
It seems like it's the cheapest way to develop a character, I think.
It's like the whole plot line.
Exactly. It's just like, we need the plot to do this.
Yeah.
So let's...
Another
dream sequence, which I thought was like Wheel of Time ending. Okay, Sauron, like, goes inside her mind, is trying to convince her. And it's like, first off, it feels such like a waste of time when we know who Galadriel is. All she cares about is defeating Sauron. We know who she's going to end up being. Spending any amount of time in trying to get the audience to think that maybe she'll be seduced by Sauron. It's like, no. And then the stupidest reason I think Sauron convinces Galadriel not to tell them is that, what will they say if they find out that you were helping me this whole time?
You'll be even more of an outcast.
Yeah.
And it's almost like her motivation throughout the whole entire season ends and changes because, like you said, the whole season she cares about killing Sauron. But now she suddenly doesn't care about killing Sauron. Like, she cares about preserving her reputation.
Well, and preserving the elves, which is like, okay, but even if you guys still did these rings, like, you could just say, like, that was Sauron. He's been deceiving us. Yeah. We need to be careful. Like,
but that's what I mean about.
But they had to do that because of the plot. They're just like, we have to make sure she doesn't tell them. Like, and then Elrond doesn't tell them either. It's like...
no, Elrond is at the end, and I think looking at her like, why aren't you saying it? Is there something else? I interpret it that way. But I think that goes into the whole problem that we have with this character. With the convenience of the plot, it doesn't do justice with the character. You're caring too much about the plot. You're not caring enough about the character true motivation and having it go through. Because now, I thought for a moment, like I said, that, look, Galadriel, she's getting tactful. I wish she was like this the whole season. No. But then at the end, she becomes the Galadriel that annoyed the crap out of me, which is, I don't know how to do this.
She just feels like a puppet to the plot. And many characters do, but especially her. Like, it annoyed me even more than the characters I just did not care about. There wasn't enough establishing us to care about them. We're told by the writers, we're shown like, hey, this is an important character. You should care about them. Doesn't mean we do, because we're not seeing their choices. Character is all about choices made under pressure, you know? Like, a character, we get to see who they are when they have to make hard choices. And Galadriel making the choice in the first episode to jump off the ship, that's an interesting character thing. I thought, you know, under pressure, she has to make this choice. And then the rest of the show, it just feels like she's just on a one-track line of aiding the plot. When we got to the big battle episode, when Mordor is created. And I hated how they revealed, like, with the title of, like, the Southlands, and then it dissolves and says Mordor.
No, I actually like that one.
I just thought that was kind of like, we get it. Like, you don't
No,
have to...
I like that, though, because it's also catering. You got to think about fans who, like, of the show, who have no history with Lord of the Rings at all, but maybe in a book. But for a show, I think there's just so many fake outs. And a lot of them aren't done well, that it's just kind of like
predictable. There's honestly so much in this season that's it's hard to pick it up.
We're talking a lot about Galadriel, and I feel like we should talk more about other characters as well. Like, what do you think about the Stranger?
You know, I was like intrigued at first, but then it just stagnated until the last episode. Also, the caravan of the Harfoots, when they leave, I lost all interest in that when I saw how cruel the leaders were and how they were like, if you can't carry yourself, then it's like, screw you, you're just gonna die. All right, that's brutal, but I don't give a shit about like this community anymore, you know? I care about their little family. I was like, okay, I care a little bit, but so much time was devoted on the stagnant storyline of the Stranger not being able to speak. It was almost like, although this was done intentionally in Stranger Things, or Twin Peaks: The Return with Dougie, you know, just like, when is he going to evolve, you know? You're waiting, like, when is he going to learn language? The Stranger was Dougie. That was the Stranger to me.
Dougie was different because Dougie, like, if you've ever watched
Dougie was way better than the Stranger.
He just loves coffee and it's just like the funniest thing ever.
Okay, I love Dougie Jones in Twin Peaks: The Return. We should do
Twin Peaks, yeah.
But anyway. I just reminded me of that, but not in a good way. I was like, okay, like, we know there's going to be a reveal later on. I just don't care enough about the story. But I think
that's the thing, is like, I feel like they should have done a little bit more reveal with the Stranger early on.
It should have moved faster, yeah.
And because the whole, like, fake out of, well, the Stranger may be actually Sauron. It's like, I don't think a lot of people fell for that. So I think it would have done a lot more, like, it would have hooked the audience in with having a little bit more of a solid storyline. To your point about the community, about the Harfoots, I think I understand in a way, like, why they are the way they are, because they're small people. They have to kind of be the stern people for survival. But at the same time, what you're taking away from that is the whole idea of community. Because when the leader of the Harfoots died, you're not really mourning for him anymore, because he's done, like, he's like, basically like, okay, if you can't keep up, you're going to be left behind. I'm sorry.
I think it maybe could have worked if the show wasn't so focused on emphasizing how important the Harfoot community was and how they have this bond. And there's a lot of scenes devoted to the legacy and how important they are. And it's so much time devoted to this. And yet we see the hypocrisy of how they don't care about their own people, and they don't care about the Stranger. They don't care about anything but themselves. And this last episode, they try to redeem the leader of the Harfoots. Rung hollow to me.
I do want to say that when Nori left with the Stranger at the very end, I think, and that's what I was talking about earlier, I think that actually did really well. I feel like season 2 will be more invested, hopefully, with Nori and the Stranger, because it's just them two.
Yeah,
but at the same time, knowing how it ended, it kind of pissed me off that they spent so much time talking about this community.
Yeah.
Because that's like, those are the excerpts that I don't feel like does any big service. I feel like you can make the point quicker.
It could have been much quicker and more succinctly made, and I get they're trying to develop and make it feel like a real lived world, but when you're focusing a lot of time on stuff that doesn't matter to the audience, when you're not getting us engaged with what it is, and it just more or less window dressing, I think that Nori should have left with the Stranger in like the third episode or something, you know, like, let's just get this moving. By the end of the season, I'm just waiting. We're just like, okay, when are the writers going to decide that we can get a little treat? Remember the scene where Nori tells her parents, like, I don't want to be just a Harfoot.
I don't want to be just a human.
I don't want to be just a human. To me, it's just like, you can be a Harfoot and like, you
can
know,
be a brave Harfoot.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think you guys get the point.
Oh, no, hold on. Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
The Stranger at the end of the last episode, we both started howling laughing, and I don't know if this was supposed to be funny or not.
I love that, yeah.
When the Stranger finally defeats the like pale people who have been following him around, he goes, I am good.
Well, no, they go,
you are Sauron.
You are not Sauron. You are... And then he goes, good, I am good.
No, I thought he was going to say, I am Gandalf. It was just super silly. Like,
it was very silly. But I mean, I honestly, though, that part could have been funny. And I think they could have left that in because it was actually a funny moment. And then at the same time, given Galadriel more of a tact, if she's a soldier, if she is really a warrior, like they are putting her out to be, make her a freaking warrior. She's supposed to be a very high ranking warrior. She's not a newbie. She's really
just felt
old.
So out of character for her to just let Sauron just like mosey off. The whole season you're talking about how too driven, how too obsessed Galadriel is with killing Sauron, and then when the Sauron is revealed, she's just like,
I almost wanted her to fall in love with Sauron just to make it more interesting that like the whole time maybe she's falling in love with him. But like they don't have any kinship except for...
There's no chemistry. There's no chemistry.
There's no chemistry. So I feel like it would have been if they were going to go with like, because, you know, in the dream sequence that she has, he's trying to seduce her and get into mind because, you know, Sauron is he's a trickster in a lot of ways. So... Yeah. It's like, it would have been better if they were going to do that if she had like fallen in love with him and then he acted like he was falling in love with her back. If there was actually some kind of just internal battle there. It's like, oh my God, I fell in love with you and you turn out to be the person that I hate.
In sort of like The Hobbit, it feels like they're dragging out material that could be done a lot faster, and they're just stretching it out as long as they can.
Just
and
like
it's
that,
like,
yeah.
But the problem is, it's like there's a lot of material here, so it's like, why are they having to stretch it all out?
I am going to watch the second season. I do like Lord of the Rings overall, and I do think, like I said,
I just want to see where they take it. Like, what are you going to do?
I would rewatch the episodes, but I would like omit a lot of the episodes out. I would just rewatch probably like maybe the first episode.
Well, it's not coming out for like 2 more years,
and then the last one. Really?
Yeah, because it takes long to make and produce, and they haven't. I think they just started writing the second season. Like,
I think that like, well, hopefully then they have a lot of good time to turn things around. I think it works in a book because at least for me as a reader, I really like to know the background. I think a lot of readers, you have like thousands of pages for these types of books.
And
but
I get the sense that this is written sort of like how a novel would be done, where it's just like, we need to spend time with these characters and be in their POVs. The problem is you're getting their thoughts and feelings, so it's more engaging that way. In TV or movies, like you can't just like show us these characters on screen for a long time, just doing things and for us to care about them.
Yeah, and that's why I think like I'm a little bit more flexible when it comes to the portrayal of books into shows and movies, because not everything that works in a book is going to work in a show or a movie, guys. It's not. So they're going to have to change things around. They're going to have to take liberties with it.
After going through and talking about the whole season, would you still give it a 7 out of 10?
I would.
Really?
Yeah. I could have given it lower, but like I think I already established myself as being a little biased with the whole franchise.
All right.
I can't do it in my heart to do that, but like I understand why you do it that way. It hurts me because I wanted to succeed so bad, so it just kind of hurts me to give it a lower rating.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for watching. Let us know what you think of Rings of Power Season 1, and let us know what you want us to watch and review next.
Yep. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.